Something rare is happening in women's basketball right now. Not rare for the WNBA, but rare in the entire history of American sports. A moment so powerful that leagues are usually only gifted one or two chances like it per century. And the danger isn't that the WNBA doesn't see it. The danger is that it sees it and hesitates anyway. Picture this. One player steps into an arena and tickets disappear instantly. Television ratings don't inch upward, they detonate. Social media doesn't react calmly, it spirals into obsession. Fans who never watched a single women's basketball game suddenly know schedules, rivalries, even referees' names. That kind of gravitational pull isn't normal. It isn't manufactured. It can't be coached or marketed into existence. That player exists right now. And whether people admit it or not, she has already changed the trajectory of women's basketball. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sports history is filled with leagues that were handed moments like this and still managed to fumble them. Not because the talent wasn't real, but because leadership got nervous, because balance sounded safer than momentum, because protecting the ecosystem felt smarter than embracing the wildfire standing right in front of them. This exact crossroads has appeared before. In the late 1970s, professional basketball in America wasn't thriving, it was collapsing. Finals aired on tape delay, attendance was embarrassing, networks treated the league like a liability. Then two rookies entered the league and flipped the sport on its head almost overnight. Suddenly people cared again. Suddenly arenas were loud. Suddenly basketball mattered. And yet, behind the scenes, executives panicked. They worried the spotlight was too narrow. They argued that leaning into individual stars would distort the league's identity. They whispered about risk, imbalance, dependency. In other words, they feared success because it arrived in a form they couldn't control. That fear nearly cost the league everything. The pattern is always the same. Greatness arrives faster than institutions can emotionally process it. Leaders respond cautiously when boldness is required. They tell themselves they're being responsible, when in reality, they're being reactive. By the time the evidence becomes undeniable, precious years have already been wasted. That's the real danger facing the WNBA right now. This moment isn't just about a rookie having a strong season. It's about whether a league understands how cultural momentum actually works, whether it knows the difference between fairness and growth, whether it recognizes that attention doesn't need to be evenly distributed to benefit everyone. It needs to be maximized. Because history is brutally consistent about one thing. Leagues don't collapse from betting too hard on greatness. They collapse from failing to recognize it in time. And what's coming next makes this moment even more urgent, because this isn't the first warning sports history has given us. It's the second. I'll break down the next era when a league faced this exact dilemma and nearly repeated the same mistake, only louder. By the mid-1980s, professional basketball thought it had learned its lesson. The league had survived its crisis. Ratings were up. Fans were back. Executives believed they finally understood star power, how to manage it, how to control it, how not to let it overwhelm the system. Then a young guard entered the league and shattered every assumption they thought was settled. His name was Michael Jordan. Jordan didn't just attract attention, he absorbed it. People didn't tune in to watch teams anymore, they tuned in to watch him. Arenas sold out months in advance when his team came to town. Networks reshuffled programming around his appearances. Advertisers stopped asking if they could attach their brand to him and started asking how much it would cost. And once again, behind closed doors, panic set in. Executives worried the league was becoming too dependent on a single player. They asked the same questions that always surface when greatness arrives at full volume. What happens if he gets hurt? What happens if fans only care about one team? What happens if the league's identity collapses into one name? Those fears weren't irrational, but they were backward. What the league hadn't fully grasped yet was this. A transcendent star doesn't shrink the ecosystem. They expand the entry point. Millions of people who came to watch Jordan didn't stop there. They discovered rival teams. They learned other players' names. They followed playoff races. One obsession became an entire habit. Still, the league hesitated. Jordan faced relentless physical punishment. Defenders weren't just trying to stop him, they were trying to break him down. hard fouls, borderline dangerous contact, strategies designed to intimidate rather than compete. At first, the league stayed silent, treating it as just part of the game. That silence almost proved disastrous. Eventually, reality forced a decision. The league recognized that protecting its most valuable asset wasn't favoritism, it was survival. Rules were adjusted, officiating evolved, skill was rewarded instead of punished. And once that shift happened, something extraordinary followed. Basketball didn't just grow, it exploded. Global audiences emerged, merchandising reached new heights, television deals ballooned. The league didn't lose credibility by embracing Jordan, it gained cultural dominance. The fear of dependency had blinded leadership to a deeper truth. They hadn't leaned in enough. And here's the part that matters right now. The WNBA is standing at the exact same inflection point. A player has arrived who draws viewers not because she's being promoted, but because people can't look away. The attention isn't fragile, it's combustible. And just like before, there are voices arguing that the spotlight should be dimmed, redistributed, or softened in the name of balance. History has already answered how that story ends. The real mistake isn't centering a league around greatness. The real mistake is pretending greatness doesn't require protection. Because the next lesson sports history delivers is the most painful one of all, and it only becomes visible after a star disappears. That's where everything changes when a league discovers what happens after its biggest star walks away and realizes it didn't build enough around them. The most revealing moment in modern basketball history didn't happen during a championship parade or a record-breaking performance. It happened on a quiet October day in 1993 when the league learned what life looked like without the force it had built everything around. That was the day Michael Jordan walked away. At the time, the shock was total. Jordan wasn't fading, he wasn't declining, he was at the absolute peak of his power. Championships, MVPs, cultural dominance that extended far beyond sports. And then, suddenly, he was gone. What followed wasn't subtle. Television ratings didn't dip, they collapsed. Nearly overnight, viewership dropped by close to 20%. Merchandise sales plunged. Networks that had paid premium prices for broadcast rights watched their investment lose value in real time. But the most unsettling realization came next. It wasn't just Jordan's team that suffered. Every franchise felt the impact. Every market, every arena. The league had believed it was protecting itself by not becoming too dependent on one star. Instead, it discovered something far more unsettling. They hadn't depended on him enough. They hadn't fully capitalized on the moment while they had it. They hadn't built enough infrastructure, storylines, and momentum around the phenomenon to sustain interest in his absence. Their caution, the same caution once framed as wisdom, had quietly limited the league's ceiling. When Jordan returned in 1995, the response was immediate and decisive. There was no more hedging, no more pretending the league's growth wasn't directly connected to his presence. He was promoted aggressively, protected visibly, positioned unapologetically as the centerpiece of the sport. What followed became the most successful era in basketball history. And this is where the lesson becomes impossible to ignore. The danger isn't building too much around a transcendent star. The danger is underbuilding, wasting the narrow window when attention is abundant and cultural relevance is fragile. Because once that window closes, it doesn't reopen on command. That's the warning sign flashing for the WNBA right now. A generational player has arrived at just the right moment. When audiences are curious, media is paying attention, and women's basketball is finally entering mainstream conversation. But instead of maximizing that momentum, the league appears hesitant, careful, afraid of appearing unbalanced. History is brutally clear about what happens next. When leagues hesitate during moments of explosive growth, the loss isn't immediate, it's delayed. Interest fades gradually. Casual fans drift away. The sport slips back into niche status, not because it lacked talent, but because it failed to lock in belief while it had the chance. The NBA learned this lesson the hard way, only after it nearly lost everything Jordan had built for them. The WNBA is being offered the same warning in advance. The question isn't whether Caitlin Clark will remain great. The question is whether the league will do enough before the moment passes. because the next comparison from NBA history makes this situation even more uncomfortable and even more urgent. That's where we talk about what happens when a star isn't just dominant, but polarizing, and why controversy might actually be the fuel the WNBA is refusing to use. By the early 2000s, professional basketball had already lived through multiple eras of star-driven growth. You'd think the league would have been immune to panic by then. But when a teenager from Ohio entered the spotlight, the cycle repeated. Only this time, the tension wasn't just about dominance, it was about division. That teenager was LeBron James. Before he ever played a professional minute, he was already everywhere. Magazine covers, national TV games, a historic endorsement deal before his first practice. The hype wasn't gradual, it was overwhelming. And almost immediately, the backlash arrived. Critics called him manufactured. Veterans questioned whether he had earned the attention. Fans of other teams complained that the coverage was unfair. Media debates exploded around a single idea. Was the league shoving one player down everyone's throat? Sound familiar? The NBA could have responded the same way cautious leagues always do, by pulling back, spreading attention more evenly, and trying to neutralize the noise. Instead, they did something far more dangerous and far more effective. They leaned in. They understood something counterintuitive. Polarization isn't toxic. Apathy is. Every person who disliked LeBron still tuned in to watch him fail. Every critic still consumed content about him. Every debate kept the league at the center of the sports conversation. The argument itself became oxygen. The league didn't try to resolve the tension. It amplified it. And in doing so, they turned controversy into engagement, engagement into relevance, and relevance into sustained growth. The NBA became unavoidable. You didn't have to love LeBron, you just had to care. Now bring that lens to the present. Caitlin Clark didn't ask to become the focal point of women's basketball. She earned it through record-breaking performances, sold-out arenas, and ratings that dwarfed expectations. Yet almost immediately, a familiar undercurrent emerged. Claims of overexposure, suggestions that her popularity was exaggerated, quiet resentment from those who felt overshadowed. This is the exact moment where leagues reveal whether they understand momentum. The WNBA appears to be treating polarization as a problem to manage rather than a resource to harness. Instead of framing the debate as proof of relevance, the league seems content to step back and let the tension fester without direction. That's a mistake history has already warned against. Elite athletes who spark debate don't fracture leagues, they energize them. They pull new audiences into the conversation, even if those audiences arrive skeptical. The worst possible outcome isn't criticism, it's silence. But here's where the situation turns darker. The resistance surrounding Clark doesn't appear limited to fans or media narratives. It's showing up on the court, in physical play that borders on hostility, in inconsistencies that raise questions, in moments where the league's silence feels louder than any statement. And that silence carries consequences. Because when new fans tune in and see excellence punished rather than protected, they don't debate, they disengage. First impressions harden quickly, and once they do, it becomes nearly impossible to win those viewers back. The NBA learned that protecting its stars wasn't about favoritism, it was about trust. Trust that excellence would be rewarded, not targeted. The WNBA is being tested on that same principle right now. And the next question history forces us to ask might be the most uncomfortable one yet, because it flips the power dynamic completely. That's where we ask the question no league ever wants to face. What happens when the star realizes she doesn't need the league anymore?